Well, hello. I thought I'd take a moment to give you a big picture overview of how the immune system deals with an invading substance. Now, when we talk about invading substances, I'm referring to things like viruses, bacteria. Before I go too much farther, though, I want to tell you something. If you're a student in my anatomy and physiology class, do know that this is a broad picture, big picture overview of what goes on. In class, we will go into more detail of these steps, but I think it's good to know how everything broadly works together from a bigger perspective. So, again, this is a video that you can watch over and over and over again until you get tired of hearing me. When does that happen? When does anyone get tired of hearing me, huh? Anyway, so, particles in the atmosphere that may infect us, may make us sick. Viruses, bacteria, fungal infections, so on and so forth. You might not realize this, but these are prevalent in the environment constantly. In the air, on things that you touch around you. These particles are everywhere. Good thing we have an immune system to help fight that, to help keep us safe from all these illnesses around us. Because with all these things that can make us sick, imagine if we didn't have that immune system to protect us. And then you can also imagine there are some people that have immune disorders who don't have quite a robust immune system to protect them. And you can imagine how then they would get sick from the particles just in our environment more easily. Okay, enough of that aside. Let me give you a little bit of a scenario of how all the components, again speaking in broader, more generic terms, work together. And I'm again speaking in broader terms. If you're not someone in my class and you just kind of want to know how the immune system works, this will help you out because I'm not going to be quite so sciencey here. So, okay. Imagine you're just going about your merry way on any given day and well, we naturally have bacteria on our skin, but any bacteria foreign particle might try to invade through your skin or whatnot. Not good, because we don't want to get sick from it, but bacteria want to use us, bacteria viruses want to use us as a host to survive as well. All that aside, the first thing that is going to protect us from the bacteria, viruses, from the pathogen, let's just use that more generic term, the first thing that's going to protect us from the pathogen is barriers. So these barriers are not specific to a particular type of pathogen. I'll talk later about particular parts of the immune system that are specific to individual pathogens. But these are not. These don't discriminate. These will fend off no matter what type of pathogen it is. So I was almost hitting at this a moment ago. The first barrier that protects us that we have is our skin. Our skin covers all of our internal organs and covers all of our insides. So we have this nice barrier surrounding us that protects us from things going inside us. And so our skin, provides us with an immune barrier there. Problem is, sometimes we get cuts in our skin and things can hop inside the cut. Not only that, if you're someone like me and you talk a lot, you can have particles enter through your mouth. You can also have particles enter through your nose. You know, if you rub your nose, you can also have particles enter through your eyes if you rub your eyes a lot, and so on and so forth. So the skin is a great barrier. It's not a perfect barrier by any means, but we have other barriers that are still fairly superficial that help protect us from incoming items. Some of the still not quite so superficial as our skin, but still relatively superficial barriers in our body are nose hairs. We don't like to think about those, but as we breathe in air, it helps protect things. Mucus lining our nasal passages can help trap particles that we breathe in. And that actually doesn't just line our nose, but it goes down through some of the tubes that form our respiratory system as well. If you're familiar with these things, like the throat, the pharynx, the trachea, going all the way down into our lungs. Lungs are delicate tissue, we want to protect them. So mucus can help with that. There are other things like small hairs that line the passages of our respiratory system, cilia that help sweep things up and out. Stomach acid, that's another barrier. So I was initially talking about things that are part of our respiratory system. What if you breathe in a particle? But also, sometimes we eat contaminated food, right? So what if you ate an infectious particle and it made it past your mouth? We do have some antibodies in our mouth, but what if it makes it past that? Stomach acid is very, very strong, and it can hopefully kill off whatever might infect you. Now, I've just listed a whole bunch of relatively superficial barriers in our body. I haven't exhausted the entire list, but just to keep things from getting too out of control time-wise, I'll keep it to that. Now, what if the pathogen makes it beyond that first line of defense that we have? Well, we have a second level of non-specific defense. Non-specific, again, meaning that it doesn't discriminate with the type of pathogen. It'll just protect us against all types of pathogen, just like our skin defends against any type of pathogen. The mucus will trap any type of pathogen. It's not like it's going to say, oh, I'll trap the cold virus, but the flu virus I'll let go on. But no, mucus doesn't do that. Mucus just traps anything that it can. So skin, mucus, stomach acid, things like that we talked about. What if it gets past those things? Well, if we start getting infected, if we start getting sick from one of these things, there are a handful of mechanisms that our body has. If we start getting an infection, the immune system will start triggering a whole bunch of responses, one of them being the inflammatory response. I'm not going to go into detail on this because, again, if you're in my class, we will talk about the inflammatory response. But what that does, aside from all the symptoms that we're familiar with inflammation, pain and redness and swelling and things like that, if you have a local cut, and it kind of also goes on your body if you're actually sick, you will have a release of chemicals as a result of the infection that signal the immune system, hey body, something's wrong here. Immune system, do something now. So that just triggers the immune system to really release every single weapon that it has to fight that infection. So that's inflammation, and that's if you started to get sick. There are other types of immune cells in our body that will upregulate or increase in number. And there are plenty of cells that, again, don't discriminate based on the pathogen that will actually, for lack of better words, go around, look for foreign particles, and eat them. Kind of like little Pac-Men. Come around, eat them, chew them up, destroy them. So again, those are things that our body will do, that our immune system will do to destroy pathogens. And so first line of defense, more like barriers. Second line of defense, what if we start getting sick? And those are things like the inflammatory process and such, and other immune chemicals that are released to really tell the immune system, hey, let's get started here, let's get something going. Now, if that really doesn't do anything, because sometimes it doesn't, because, sometimes we really get sick and it lasts for a couple of weeks, there is a third step that it can get to. Like I said, a lot of us often get to this point. And that's when the big guns of the immune system come out. They generally have a stronger response because these are cells of the immune system that have specific responses. These are cells, if you've heard of these before, if you've been in my class, hopefully you have heard of them before. But if you haven't been in my class, you might have heard of B cells and T cells. And T cells, there are different subcategories of them, which I won't talk about here. But B cells and T cells are immune cells that there are individual types of B and T cells, each of which will respond specifically to a specific pathogen. So there's a B cell that responds to the influenza virus. There's a B cell that responds to the chickenpox virus. There's a B cell that responds to this year's cold virus, so on and so forth. And it's still kind of in question how our body generates these exactly. It's kind of a genetic mix-up that our body does. Genetic shuffling, again, no details here. But when our body is infected with one of these, the specific cell that we need, which we have just a few copies of, will just go from the few copies, it gets the signal, it goes from a few copies to many, many, many copies. So it's like the body is building its army to defeat this one specific pathogen. And these things have just specific instructions to go out, seek, and destroy. So they're seeking and destroying every single instance they encounter of this one pathogen. And they're really, really powerful. So in case you're wondering, then why doesn't the body use these B and T cells first, the ones that are specific to the pathogen that we are being infected with, and they don't target other cells, which is good for the most part, so our healthy cells stay as they are. Our unhealthy cells get destroyed and just put away. Well, that's because in order for our body to go through the process of the immune system letting our body know, hey, we got a problem here, and going from that couple of cells and ramping up to the thousands or whatever of cells, and for each of those thousands of cells to actually go out and generate the response, that can take about 7 days. So it takes a long time, which is why if you get sick with anything, it can take a while for you to get better. Because if that pathogen makes it beyond the first couple of levels of, the skin, the stomach acid, blah, 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 which I talked about in the beginning, hopefully that catches things. But if it didn't catch this one particular illness that you've gotten sick with, then it gets to the point where it triggers that specific immunity. I'm changing terms here. Before I talked about nonspecific. Now these cells are specific to pathogens. We have nonspecific and specific. Once the specific immune system gets activated, we are expanding from a few cells to several thousand cells. Those cells go out and seek and destroy. And like I said, that can take about a week. So while those cells are getting ramped up to destroy, that's when you start to get a little sick. That's when your body goes through the symptoms of whatever it is you have. And once those cells are actually going out and destroying the pathogen, that's when you start to feel a little bit better because you don't have the cells, you don't have the virus or bacteria making you sick anymore. And that, in a very big nutshell, is my summary of the steps of how your body deals with an illness. One caveat I will have here is the immune system, or immunology rather, is a part of the body that there's still lots of question marks, or a system of the body where there's still lots of question marks. So every 5 years, or every 4 or 5 years, I'll say, when I'm teaching this subject, I really have to revise because sometimes there's just small changes in the field, sometimes there are major changes in the field, but I'm speaking from what we know now, and I'm kind of leaving still some question marks in some places. So chances are I'm going to be making a new video probably 3 or 4 years from now when they come out and say, no, we didn't mean to say that. This is what we meant to say based on some new research. So again, this is what we understand now. And hopefully this gave you some better understanding of how our body works. For now, that's it. Thanks.